There is a moment, somewhere deep in the imagination, when you picture the world as it truly was tens of thousands of years ago, a world of ice, wind, and darkness, a world where night could stretch for 14 long hours and winter could swallow the land in temperatures far below anything most of us will ever face. No jackets, no shelters with insulation, no matches, no lighters, no modern tricks, just a human being, just cold breath, just survival. And when you stand in that world, even only in your mind, a humbling realization hits you. Our ancestors lived through conditions that would break most modern people within a single night. They did it without electricity, without fuel, without the idea of a survival kit. Yet they endured. They adapted, and they mastered the one force that determined whether you lived or died when the wind howled across the ice age. Fire. Fire was not comfort. Fire was existence. It was warmth against the cold, safety against predators, the difference between raw meat and nourishment, between fear and belonging. And among all ancient humans, the Neanderthals stood face to face with the harshest winters on Earth. What is astonishing is not just that they had fire, but that they created it with a method so reliable, so intelligent, and so effective that modern survivalists still struggle to match it. This was not mythology. This was skill. This was engineering born from necessity. And once you understand the method they used, once you see the precision and the wisdom behind it, you begin to realize something powerful. The story of Firecraft is not the story of a spark. It is the story of who we once were. It is the story that still burns inside us. To understand how the Neanderthals created fire, we have to go back to the very beginning of their technique, a method that was far more advanced than many people imagine when they think about prehistoric life. For a long time, researchers assumed that ancient humans relied only on friction fire, the kind made by rubbing wood together. But discoveries across Europe began to challenge that idea. Archaeologists found flint stones with tiny parallel scratches, and beside them, pieces of a gleaming golden mineral that had been shattered in a very specific way. Those finds revealed the truth. Neanderthals were not using friction. They were using pyrite. Pyrite, also known as firestone, is a mineral made of iron sulfide. When struck with a hard stone like flint, it breaks into small glowing fragments that can reach temperatures of over 800 degrees Celsius, far hotter than the embers produced by friction. These fragments behave like miniature comets, each one a burst of heat, capable of igniting tinder almost instantly. This was not an accidental discovery. Neanderthals recognized the power of pyrite and understood the difference between minerals, angles, and impact force. Flint is harder, pyrite is slightly softer. And when flint strikes pyrite, the explosion of tiny sparks is consistent and predictable. Evidence from sites such as Abri Romani in Spain, La Ferracie in France, and Grotte du Rennes shows flint pieces shaped exactly for this purpose, with wear patterns pointing to repeated, intentional striking. Some pyrite stones even show signs of heat oxidation, meaning they had been used again and again near fire. Imagine the scene. A Neanderthal sits at the mouth of a cave as night falls. In front of him is a handful of tinder he prepared earlier. He lifts a sharp flint, holds a block of pyrite in his other hand, and strikes. The first spark leaps out, then another, then another. Each glowing shard dances downward, searching for a place to land. This was not clumsy trial and error. It was a refined skill, practiced through generations, and it formed the core of one of the most reliable fire-making systems our species has ever known. To appreciate why the Neanderthal method mattered so much, we have to understand the world they lived in. Their environment was not the mild forests and temperate seasons we know today. Much of Europe during their time was shaped by the Ice Age. Winters were long and brutal. Winds swept across the land with a cold sharp enough to burn exposed skin. Moisture hung in the air, soaking into everything. Snow pressed into valleys. Nights lasted far longer than they do now, and warmth was something that could not be taken for granted. In this world, fire was not simply useful, It was the barrier between life and death. This is where the brilliance of the Pyrite and Flint method reveals itself. Minerals do not absorb moisture. They do not warp. They do not soften. They do not demand the fragile dryness that friction fire requires. If your hands were numb, if the air was wet, if the wood around you was saturated from days of snow, friction fire could easily fail. And it often did. The bow drill, the hand drill, the fire plow, all depend on dry materials, steady coordination, and a level of physical energy that is difficult to maintain when your body is shivering. Pyrite and flint behaved differently. As long as the tinder was kept dry, the stones would spark no matter how bitter the storm became. This consistency is exactly why archaeological sites show evidence of fire use even during glacial periods. The Neanderthals did not just happen to have fire. They had a method that worked in the most unforgiving climates on Earth. Picture a Neanderthal family inside a cave while a snowstorm roars outside. The winds scream, the temperature drops below freezing, and their only protection is a fire they must keep alive. With pyrite and flint, they could rekindle that fire even when everything else around them was frozen. That reliability shaped their daily lives. It influenced where they settled, how they moved, and how they endured long winters that would break many modern humans. In a world ruled by cold, their fire-making method was a quiet form of genius that allowed them not only to survive, but to thrive. If the stones created the spark, it was the tinder that brought the spark to life. And this is where the Neanderthals showed a level of care and intention that many people today would never expect. Tinder was not something they grabbed at the last minute. It was a material they searched for, selected, processed, and protected long before the first spark ever fell. They understood that fire begins long before the flame. Fire begins with preparation. Archaeologists studying Neanderthal sites have discovered traces of carefully chosen tinder materials. Some came from bracket fungi, especially species like horsehoof fungus, which forms a dense, fibrous interior that catches a spark easily and can smolder for hours. Other remains show the use of chaga, a dark, charcoal-like fungus that can hold an ember far longer than dry grass ever could. Birch polypore, another common fungus of Ice Age forests, was also used when it was fully dried, sometimes scraped thin to make it more responsive to heat. And it was not just fungus. Inner birch bark, packed with natural oils, ignites readily once shredded into soft curls. Plant fibers, seed heads, cattail down, and delicate dry grasses were also part of their toolkit. But what makes this even more impressive is the way they processed these materials. They did not simply break bark apart. They softened it. They shredded it. They opened the fibers with their hands until the material fluffed into a light nest that could cradle a tiny spark. Some tinder was rolled into tight, cigar-shaped bundles that burned slowly and evenly. Some was stored in dry alcoves of the cave, hung from branches, or tucked into the folds of hides to protect it from moisture. This level of preparation hints at something deeper, a mindset that treated tinder like food or tools, something essential that had to be made ready long before the moment of need. Imagine a Neanderthal sitting at the entrance of a cave at dusk. In his hands, he holds a piece of fungus that he has dried, beaten, and shaped for days. He presses it between his palms, feeling the texture. He pinches off the rough edges. He opens the fibers again to make them breathe. When he places the fungus in the center of a tinder nest, he knows it will respond to the first glowing fragment of pyrite that lands upon it. Nothing about this process was rushed. Nothing was careless. Their tinder was the quiet foundation of their firecraft, the unseen effort that allowed a single spark to grow into warmth, light, and survival. And it reveals how much thought, skill, and patience lived in the everyday world of the Neanderthal. Once a spark found its way into the tinder, the work of the Neanderthals shifted from striking stone to nurturing ember. And this, more than anything, reveals a side of their intelligence that often goes unnoticed. Creating a spark was only the beginning. Turning that spark into a living flame required patience, sensitivity, and a deep understanding of how heat behaves. Most beginners today blow too hard and extinguish their ember before it ever has a chance to grow. The Neanderthals learned long ago that fire is not forced, fire is encouraged. When a glowing fragment of pyrite settled into the tinder nest, they brought their hands around it, forming a soft cradle that shielded the ember from wind while allowing just enough air to feed it. Their breath was deliberate, not rushed, a slow, warm exhale that coaxed the ember into growing. Each breath added heat. Each moment allowed the ember to expand into the fibers around it. Their large lungs and strong hands, shaped by a lifetime of survival, made this process even more precise. They understood how ember spread, how fibers tightened, how smoke shifted when the heat reached a new layer of tinder. As the ember strengthened, they folded the nest around it, creating a pocket of rising warmth. The ember glowed deeper, brighter, almost like a heartbeat pulsing in the darkness. Only when it reached the right intensity did they introduce thin twigs, curls of birch bark, and small splinters of wood. The flame did not leap to life in an explosion. It emerged, slowly, gently, as if waking from sleep. But the true mastery of Neanderthal firecraft was not in starting fire. It was in keeping it alive. For them, fire was something to maintain, not something to restart every day. Archaeological evidence shows that they carried embers across long distances, using dried fungus as natural ember containers. These fungi could smolder for hours, even while being carried through cold wind or falling snow. Sometimes they wrapped the ember in damp leaves or tucked it into hollow pieces of bark, allowing it to breathe just enough to stay alive. At night, when the family settled into their cave, they covered their fire with a blanket of ash. Ash insulates heat by trapping pockets of air and limiting oxygen flow. Under this layer, the coals remained warm until sunrise. In the morning, all it took was a gentle breath and a handful of tinder for the fire to return. This practice was more than convenience. It was a philosophy. Keeping fire alive saved energy, saved time, and protected them from the deadly cold. But it also reflected a deeper truth. The flame was a companion, something they tended, something they respected. For the Neanderthals, fire was not a moment. Fire was a relationship. When we look back across the vast distance of time separating us from the Neanderthals, it becomes impossible not to feel a sense of awe. Their firecraft was not just a technique, it was a legacy shaped by cold nights, long winters, and the constant battle to stay alive in a world far harsher than ours. And yet, the method they developed still works today. It works in rain, it works in snow, it works when modern tools fail, when lighter fluid freezes, when matches soak through, when technology disappears. Their approach to fire shows us something essential, something we often forget in the comfort of the modern world. Survival is not about equipment, it is about understanding. The spark from pyrite and flint, the soft nest of prepared tinder, the slow breath nurturing a tiny ember, the careful habit of keeping coals alive until morning, these are more than ancient skills. They are reminders of the patience, discipline, and resourcefulness that carried humanity through the darkest ages. They show us that intelligence is not measured by technology, but by adaptation. And perhaps the most humbling part is realizing that the flame we cherish today is the same flame our ancestors guarded beneath ash, carried through forests, and kept alive beneath their hands. Their fire has never truly gone out. It burns in our stories, in our curiosity, and in the deep instinct that pulls us toward the glow of a campfire. If this glimpse into ancient firecraft has sparked something in you, then there is much more to discover. The past is full of wisdom waiting to be uncovered, one ember at a time.